Chapter 3 Personal Life. Once upon a time, back in the ancient year of 1983, I stumbled upon a single mum named Paulette Wallette. Long story short, we tied the knot and I became the stepdad of her 9-year-old son, Mike. It wasn't long before Mike decided to follow in my footsteps and attend the prestigious University of Waterloo, where I had obtained a Bachelor of Science degree. I specialized in biology, but Mike became an engineer. Meanwhile, in 1984, Paulette gifted me my very own bundle of joy, Kevin. And in 1991, she did it again, this time with a girl we named Heather. But let's save their life stories for another day, shall we? Maybe their children can spill the beans on them. Oh boy, let me tell you about my wife, Paulette. She's a saint, no doubt about it. I mean, she's had to deal with putting up with me for over 40 years now. When I met her, I was just a measly lab technician, but I had aspirations, let me tell you. So I went and got my MBA, thinking I could change the world or something. Turns out all I did was hop around from job to job like a hot potato. And let me tell you, those companies I worked for didn't exactly thrive. One went belly up after being in business for over a century, another got bought out, and one even went bankrupt. But through it all, Paulette was my rock. She was always there putting up with my crazy hobbies like birding, photography, and droning. She even developed a thick skin to deal with my quirks. I mean, I don't know how she does it. She's a Wonder Woman. She just must have the patience of a saint to deal with someone like me, a total nerd. And without her devotion to me, I'd never have been able to pursue all my passions. And boy, was I obsessed with my passions, including getting an MBA from Wilfrid Laurier University. That took me 5 years of part-time sweat. Passions. Good rabbit holes. Passions are like black holes. They'll suck you in faster than a vacuum cleaner and spit you out hours later, dazed and confused. But let's be real, what's life without a good passion project? For me, besides my amazing family, I had a few. I lived and breathed motorcycles, got a thrill from birding, bopped to balk, read more books than a library, took pics like a paparazzo, and even dabbled in droning. Not the evil kind, I promise. Who needs sleep when you've got passions like these? But passions can border on obsessions, and I've had a few of these. Like the years I spent rug hooking or on Pazanski making dyed eggs. And while writing a bird guide, BirdStar, I spent countless hours writing the rules for an expert system and recording videos for each bird. But hours well spent. Okay, so let's delve a little deeper into a few of my passions. You can tell a lot about a guy by his passions. Motorcycles. My passion for motorcycles started while I was in high school in Wawa. My wild ride began when I heard a neighbor cursing and swearing as he tried to get an old two-stroke Kawasaki to run. He finally yelled, "This piece of junk isn't worth the powder to blow it to hell." He must have been a miner like my older brother, Lorne, to talk about dynamite like that. They wouldn't have wasted dynamite. Although some student dude working at the mine used dynamite from work to blow up our high school, well, maybe it wasn't wasted. Anyways, that's when I peeped over the fence and told this guy that I would take that piece of junk off his hand. And sure enough, he took me up on it and handed me the bike in pieces over the fence. I spent the summer tinkering on it, and with the help of Lorne, I finally got it to work. Although I must admit there were a few times that he and I were prepared to blow it to kingdom come too. It was an adventure with a dangerous learning curve riding that bike. A geography lesson at school taught us about a point of maximum aggregate travel, whereby the maximum number of people passing by a point in a town or city could be determined. Wouldn't you know it, after learning that, I experienced my first motorcycle crash in front of the Wawa post office at noon. I hit a gravelly spot and off I flew in front of the most people in Wawa. I dusted myself off, picked up my bike, and nonchalantly pretended it was no big deal. I did this all the time. Let's just say I learned the value of a good helmet. Motorcycling has had a big impact on me, pun intended, and those around me. From my high school days with that small 250 Kawasaki to my 1100 RT BMW, I enjoyed the open road. I should say as long as I could stay on it, it was enjoyable. I liked that you could smell the grass and see the ducks in the ditches better than in a car. After reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, I took my children as they reached 9 or 10 years old up to Wawa from Kitchener on the back of my bike. We sure bonded, pun intended, on those trips. I ran into a drunk driver coming home from a vacation trip out west one summer. I worked for Seagram's then and knew of good whiskey when I drank it. I had picked up a bottle of Chivas Regal at the US-Canada border and was carting it home with me on the back of the bike. Just north of Fergus, Ontario, coming down from the Tobermory ferry, a drunk driver pulled out at me at night. I hit him and flew over his car, breaking my pelvis in the process. Highway 6 is a major thoroughfare, so I was conscious enough to leave my bike on the road and drag myself to the ditch. Here an old couple stopped and called the police and ambulance for me. I incurred a broken pelvis, but otherwise I survived okay. The police at first thought I was the one drinking, as the whiskey smell just permeated the scene. My poor whiskey. My doctor told me at that time that there are two types of bikers, those who have been in an accident and those who will be. Well, I had my fair share of accidents, so I figured I was good. This incident did provide me with a new bike and a cash settlement of $17,000 that I used to put down on as a first down payment on my first house. How lucky can you get, right? Shortly before I retired, I had a big rock kick up and hit me on the helmet just above my good eye. Right then and there, I decided to ditch that bike. I needed that good eye. Indeed, I kept my eye and wrote a children's short story from my motorcycle experiences in the mountains out west called Motorcycle Rodeo. I use that book now to read to the grandkids. Birding. When I was a wee lad, I read a book about some mountain boy who had a thing for hawks. Even that seagull book, Jonathan Livingston something or other, left a mark on me. And let's not forget the countless times I got pooped on by those winged devils. Despite the indignities they inflicted on me, I couldn't help but warm up to them. Maybe it was their prehistoric lineage or their abilities to fly that fascinated me. Who knows? So when I landed my first gig as a wildlife biologist, birding became a major part of my life. And even when I was slinging whiskey for Seagram's, I found a way to bring my feathered friends into the mix. I had to train some operators on how to use a fancy piece of equipment we had, but the only way I could get through to these guys was to use a computer program to identify veggies. I developed an expert system to train operators on the 4-column continuous rectifier, better known as a still. But hey, my expert system was too complicated for the master distiller, so out the window it went for Seagram's. But instead of calling it a day, I decided to develop an expert system for myself for identifying birds. I even made my own bird guide, which I called BirdStar because, why not? It was on a CD. What's that, you ask? Right. I later found out that my name Bond had a birding connection. Apparently this bloke named James Bond had written a bird guide called Birds of the West Indies. And when Ian Fleming stumbled upon his book, he decided to name his spy character after him. James Bond, the spy who loved birds. Who would have thought? Maybe there's some kind of twitching gene in us Bonds or something. Anyways, after better computer graphics emerged, I felt that the multimedia now better suited showing birds' colors and songs. Windows 95 was when I eventually collaborated with my son Kevin to turn my bird guide into a cloud-based system called eBirder, and my daughter Heather contributed with a song game. Even though birding was a big part of my life, I never quite got over the squeamishness when it came to touching the little buggers. They may have left a mark on my psyche, but I'll be damned if I let them leave a mark on my hands. Back in the day, most guys would hit the bars or the clubs, but not me. No, sir, I was all about the great outdoors, hunting and fishing trips and golfing. Sure, I'd tag along, but my true passion was birding. I'd be reeling in a big one or teeing up for the perfect golf shot, and then I'd hear a tweet or a chirp, and I'd be off in a flash to investigate. I used to be a partridge hunter, I must admit, but then I became an environmentalist and realized that shooting our feathered friends wasn't exactly eco-friendly. So I left that behind and instead focused on capturing them on camera. My brother Rick and I have an annual tradition of venturing out on a birding trip to uncover the hottest spots and snap some amazing bird pictures. It was like our own personalized paparazzi mission, except instead of celebrities, we were stalking rare and elusive birds. It was a hoot. Bach. You know what really grinds my gears? People who don't appreciate Bach's cantatas. It's like, hello, have you listened to them? They're masterpieces. That's why I started a YouTube channel called Larry's Drone Zone to showcase all 200 plus cantatas with some epic drone footage. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it for the art, you know. And let me tell you, Bach and I are like two peas in a pod. We're both INTP personalities, and we share an obsession for creating complex systems. He had his regulated music for the church, and I've got my expert bird identification system. Hey, we're basically geniuses. Now, I'm not one for religion, but I gotta hand it to Bach for turning his beliefs into some killer music. I mean, have you heard BWV 121? It's a non-stop tribute to belief without evidence. Sure, it may seem a little nauseating at first, but you gotta put it in perspective. Back in the day, what else was there to believe in? Plus, as an added bonus, I don't even have to understand German to appreciate his musical genius. Books. Oh, books. They say having a bunch of them at home is a sign of future success, but I must be the exception that proves the rule. My family's library consisted of a few old Western novels that looked like they'd been through a tumble dryer. The only book I remember receiving was a New Testament Bible in 7th grade. Why? No idea. It ended up in the trash bin. Encyclopedia salesmen were a bigger no-go than a Fuller Brush salesman at our house or a Jehovah's Witness peddling their awake pamphlets. But books always intrigued me, and I always found myself hooked on those that mattered. However, let's be real, only a few made a big impact on me. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance fooled me into philosophy. Don Quixote showed me that you could be a better Christian without a church, just by loving your fellow humans. Gulliver's Travels brought me to tears over the state of humanity. Animal Farm had me laughing at our collective idiocy. Charlotte's Web left me pondering the natural world. The Origin of Species opened my eyes to a different kind of truth, one that had been right in front of me. And let's not forget about The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which taught me that the questions you ask are often more important than the answers. Stephen Jay Gould, in his Full House, a book about baseball and evolution, taught me the importance of tempering one's expectations with the rule of large numbers, statistics. Photography. I remember the good old days of photography when cameras were as hefty as a brick and films were more expensive than gold. You'd snap away hoping for the best, only to find out your pictures looked like Bigfoot's blurry cousins. But then digital came along and that changed everything. Suddenly you could take pictures of your cat doing yoga and seeing the results immediately. No more waiting for the drugstore to develop your film, and no more Sasquatch sightings going undocumented. But now everyone's a photographer with their fancy cell phones. Kids these days don't know the struggles of lugging around a camera and zoom lens. And let me tell you, taking a picture of babies is like trying to herd cats. I even tried my hand at wedding and landscape photography, but it wasn't until I turned my lens to birds that I found my true passion. At first, shooting my daughter was like capturing magic in a frame, but then she started giving me the stink eye every time I aimed my camera her way. Teenagers, am I right? Droning. Well, hello there, my fellow Earthlings. Let me tell you a little story about my journey into the world of aerial photography. I mean, sure, I could have just climbed a tall building or something, but where's the fun in that? So in 2016, I decided to up my game and bought myself a drone. Flying that thing was like being a bird without the feathers. It was a high like no other. I was droning before it was cool, before the Canadian regulations stepped in and demanded that I get a license and some training. But hey, I ain't no quitter, so I got my license and settled into producing some pretty sweet droning videos to share online. Now, when I started putting together some of my aerial videos with some of my favorite classical tunes, I realized that this was a match made in heaven. It was like putting chocolate and peanut butter together, except way more sophisticated. And don't get me wrong, I know most people enjoy their classical music in concert halls or in churches, but have you ever tried listening to it from the air? It's a whole new world up there. I wasn't trying to make a buck off these videos, no sir. I just wanted to use some of the great copyrighted music that was available for use from artists who didn't mind me using it. I mean, sure, the composers from the Baroque, Romantic, and Classical periods had their copyrights expired, but the performers still had some rights. They could monetize my videos if they wanted, but I just wanted to share them with the world. So I started a little YouTube channel called Larry's Drone Zone to launch my videos into oblivion. And listen, I know the description of the channel is a bit lengthy, but hear me out. You'll find my aerial views by drone here, mostly of various points of interest around Kitchener, Ontario, where I live, but there are also some from different parts of Canada as well, and different countries. And let me tell you, all the music used is listed at the end. I mean, I wouldn't want you to miss out on some of those classics, right? One of my goals was to put all the Bach's cantatas up in the air, over 200 of them, which I did. Now, some people might wonder why an atheist like me is so into Bach's church cantatas, but listen, it's not about religion, it's about the music. I mean, have you heard his Brandenburg concertos? Pure genius. And sure, some of the church cantatas might take a bit of getting used to, especially if you don't speak German. But trust me, it's worth it. And who knows, maybe I'll learn German someday so I can really appreciate those vocals. Sometimes I wish there was a way to remove vocals altogether, though, and just focus on the music. But hey, that might be blasphemous to some of the true cantata devotees out there. Now, I know back in Bach's day, religion was the go-to explanation for existence and our death. But hey, times have changed. We're all just animals on this planet, living and dying like everything else. But you know what? Bach's faith provided him with inspiration, and that's what matters. His devotion to his God and his conviction in his faith provided with a God-inspired treasury of music. Thank God for that. Am I right? So come over to Larry's Drone Zone, sit back, relax with a glass of wine or scotch, and let my videos take you to a God-inspired tour of great music.